Hi, everyone. We're here with Corey Uhden and Gunnar. What is it? Thorderson?
Thorderson, yeah.
Thorderson. All right. For a Trump debate. Uh, so I want to start off by just trying to figure out what made you guys become Republicans.
Who do you want to start on that one?
You can start.
I'll let Gunnar start.
Okay, so basically my story is pretty long. I think that I went through a progression of growing up really conservative, being raised by my parents, and that with that attitude of, we need to be self-sufficient. I saw the Republican Party as the one that focused more on classical liberal values in with the economy, and I struggled through the social issues as I got to my teenager years and into college. I became much more socially liberal, and I looked at the Libertarian Party and their ideals, and I considered myself libertarian for a very long time. I still consider myself libertarian, but I don't associate with the Libertarian Party, and I think that the best way to advance liberty is through the Republican Party, because it's one of the main two contending parties that have power and influence in our country and can make a difference. And so through that party, I see that I align most with them. And so I'm currently working as a Republican to bring these type of ideals of liberty and, leaving people alone and advocating for the free market as much as I can.
All right. Now, I just want to say that Gunnar is the Utah State Director of Turning Point USA, 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to furthering the values of free markets and limited government and college campuses nationwide. And Corey is the elections contributor to the Millennial Review. All right, Corey, you can go.
Well, as William F. Buckley said, I found that conservatism is the politics of reality, that everything that's going on in the world can be defined by principles, values, and standards and rules that are easy to follow and make sense to most people. That's how I was raised, and that made a lot of sense to me. And starting college, especially here in California, where being a conservative isn't always the easiest thing to do, but it really does help you see, if you do have that viewpoint and that worldview, that it helps to refine those values a little bit more. And that's what really worked for me. So I stayed involved. I got involved in a couple campaigns, and especially around the 2012 years, with the Tea Party rising and Paul Ryan becoming such a prominent figure, I found this was the party of reality. This is the party I belong to.
And you're both
We're both what?
millennials.
Yes.
So
26.
Millennials.
Yes, I'm 23, so very much a millennial.
So do you guys figure out that you guys feel like that kind of is there something going on with millennials that are very anti-Trump?
Absolutely. I think the vibe. You want to go, Gunnar?
Oh no, you can make your point, and then I'll respond.
Well, absolutely. I think that millennials have been raised, and especially going through school right now, to hear all the worst things that they can from the liberal viewpoint. History teaches that our founding fathers were a bunch of racists that were slaveholders, and they created this institution so that they could maintain their stranglehold over people. It wasn't about freedom and liberty, according to all of our college professors. I always told people to parrot what they heard in class if you needed to get A's, but believe the exact opposite when you leave the classroom. So I think that's what's driving a lot of millennials away from conservative politics altogether. Although I think there's also a level of hostility that comes from older generations that they are responding to, thinking that they're a counterculture more than anything. And that's also a big divide.
Yeah, no, I really liked what Corey said about this countercultural movement that's really coming out, and he touched on that it's happening with the older generation. But I'd just like to further that point and say that the same thing is happening with millennials, and just the type of polarization that we're seeing across all of America, we're seeing amongst every single age group, and that definitely applies to millennials. On the point that are millennials as a whole rejecting Trump, I would say absolutely not. And the reason is pretty clear. And it starts historically, the progressive movement about 30, 40 years ago made a smart decision to attack the media, to take over the media, and focus on journalists, focus on the universities, the institutions of education, like Corey was talking about, how attacking the curriculum, changing the way that our students are taught. And I think that this isn't so much like, well, do millennials reject Trump because of the way that they've been brought up? I think that millennials have really just bought into the narrative that the media has been selling, and it hasn't been until recently that we've seen this countercultural, anti-mainstream media movement, much represented through the alt-right and this internet sensationalism of trolling and just actually thinking and having your own opinion via the internet instead of what the media is selling you, and rejecting CNN, Fox News, those types of things. So I think, to sum up with the millennials, is I think there's definitely a group that sides with the Hollywood celebrities, sides with the mainstream media, and rejects Trump because of their narrative that he's a racist, that he's a misogynist, that he just is too flamboyant, has bad language. And so I think, just as there's that group, there's also the group that says, we're not going to believe the narrative that you're selling, and we're going to think for ourselves. And because we're thinking for ourselves, we value actions more than we value words. And so they're coming to Trump in troves. And that's why you see every single online poll and every single media metric that isn't run by those CNN, ABC, Fox News, the millennials do support Trump, and it's by a large margin.
The divide is so pronounced, though, because even in the Democratic Party, the millennials went so overwhelmingly for Bernie Sanders. And that's still a divide that's going to occur for Hillary Clinton going forward. They're all Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders types. At least that absolutely is the impression that I get from it. So, yes, there's definitely Republicans, and especially young Republicans, coming into this party for the first time are going to be driven towards the Trump side of things. They're going to be, as Gunnar said, they're going to be coming from the internet. They're going to be coming from Breitbart and the alt-right. Right. And I absolutely see that there's millennials wearing those Reagan Bush shirts that think they're the coolest thing in the world. And there was some of that. It's not nearly as pronounced then as it is now. And that's a divide, I think, that's occurring across the board for the millennial generation. Because when I went to college, starting in 2008, I remember it was Barack Obama everything. Everything was Barack Obama. You didn't have anybody vouching for McCain or Palin. It was absolutely Obama everything. And I think after 8 years, there's a natural waning of that. It's not going to fall in line. They did for Bernie Sanders. I definitely think there was a lot of passion in the college campuses, college towns of America for that. But I don't think it's there for Hillary Clinton. And that's probably driving a little bit of the divide. And frankly, they are concerned about it in her Brooklyn headquarters. They have to be, because if she hits too few of the marks that Barack Obama had, then this election could be closer than they want it to be. And especially with what she's dealing with now, they don't want anything to be falling off right now. So they need them too. But I still think there's a big divide between Democrats, Republicans. I think it's driven by demographic changes as well. The growing populations in our country are African American, Latino, and especially single women. And they are not enamored with Republicans at all. They've been taught to hate Republicans. And they got before this, they got a lot of their news from The Daily Show and things of that nature. So that's where a lot of that comes from too. Culture is a huge influence. And I think part of what explains Trump's phenomenon too is that he comes from the culture. He's the celebrity that got into politics, whereas you had Barack Obama as a politician who became a celebrity. And that's kind of been a different dynamic to deal with for this past election cycle.
Do you guys feel like Trump is too polarizing?
What was that?
Do you feel like Trump is really polarizing?
Yes and no. I think the trends of polarization were already very strong. And that's just our tribal political nature. What I think became more pronounced this year is the actual feeling of standing with your side and treating others as if they are traitors for not standing with your side. There's polls out there that suggest 41% of Republicans don't trust Democrats and think they are a threat to our country. And there's also polls that suggest 65% of Democrats don't trust Republicans and think they're a threat to the country. So that pronounced polarization has absolutely come to the fore with Donald Trump as the nominee. Absolutely, it has.
So here's where I think this segues really well into the debate. Yes, Trump is polarizing. I think he has to be. This country is more polarized than it ever has been, and what that polarization represents is two very different paths that our country can go. We can either go the progressive Bernie Sanders views adopted by Hillary Clinton after she rigged the election. And then you've got the Trump, Mike Pence, Republican, more so on the limited government side and lower taxes. But they're more and more representing polarized views and directions for this country. And so my point, and I'll bring this up as we begin this debate, is that the only way that we prevent ourselves from going down this path of more Supreme Court justices that are progressive, more of our rights being taken away, and more of a sense that we're going to actually be able to attack our massive debt that we hold, and the type of deficit spending that is out of control. The only way we rein that in is by electing Donald Trump as our next president. And so that's my central argument, and I'll bring it up through and through as we get this debate rolling. But I think that if you reject Trump, then you're basically saying, I want the other direction for this country. In the short term, you may have a utopian vision for the world in 50 years, but in the short term, we have a decision to make. Do we want our government led by a progressive agenda by Hillary Clinton, or do we want to go down the route that Trump has sold, whether you like or dislike some of the small, minute details of that plan? It is a radically different direction than Hillary Clinton has, and I think that's the right direction through Donald Trump for our country.
I would agree with you if I really felt that's what Trump believed and that's what Trump was going to do, but I have never believed that, and I think it shows in all of his response to the Supreme Court on the debate question was to make it all about himself again, and to make it seem like that's his only problem with the Supreme Court is that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had something to say about him. I think Hillary Clinton gave the worst possible answer on that question by saying that she wanted to appoint justices that would basically follow this liberal litmus test. I absolutely reject that in total, but I didn't hear the Constitution more than once in Trump's statement, and I didn't hear him talking about applying the principles of our amendments to those questions of the day. So, and also you mentioned deficit spending and debt spending. He has not presented a plan on entitlements, which we know are the drivers of our debt. He has not presented a plan on actual spending of welfare that we know is not that big a deal, but also he has presented an argument that he could spend more money. He said that he wants to spend more on infrastructure. And I thought it was a clever way to turn their argument on its head, this roads and bridges argument we always get to when you're talking about 4% of the budget. But at the same time, I don't think it's indicative of any kind of conservative principle. I wonder what kind of conservative principles would drive somebody in the direction of Donald Trump at that point. It's been something I have not been able to see and resonate with since the beginning.
Okay, so I'll respond just point by point. So first, we were talking about the Supreme Court, and you said he's making it all about himself, and basically the problem with that is Donald Trump cannot put himself as a Supreme Court justice. He's laid out a list. There's great people on that list. Senator Mike Lee's brother, in fact, who is a judge here in Utah, very conservative. And when you look at the list, I've had some of the most conservative Republican people in the state of Utah, where I'm at, who hate Trump, hate everything about his character, say, now, that's a really good Supreme Court justice list. And if anything else, I'll vote for him for that reason. And so I think the Supreme Court argument, I'm going to say that Trump, that's not an issue for me, nor is it an issue for many Americans, because he's put out a really good list and he can't really appoint himself. And so he's going to put up these people. He's going to, I mean, he made Mike Pence his VP after consulting half the party, and they told him it was the best pick. He can pick good people for positions, and even his family, people who know him in business, say that's what he's best at. He's best at bringing people to the table and picking the best person for the job. And he knows where his limits are. He knows where his knowledge ends. And so he'll bring on these people who are really good at those positions, and he'll put them in those spots. I'm not worried at all about the Supreme Court. In the case that Hillary Clinton becomes our president, then I'm worried as hell for the direction of our Supreme Court. And so that, to me, is a huge issue to vote for Donald Trump. Second, deficit spending. You mentioned he doesn't have a plan for entitlements or welfare, and that he plans to spend on infrastructure. I think we have a general problem right now with our party, and it's this anti-intellectual movement that's been going on. And the people that populate our party have really not been intellectually engaged with how economics works. Now, I study macroeconomics. That's what I do. And as I'm learning more and more about the nuanced ways that economists deal with these large-scale things in the economy, you see that a view that's like, okay, all taxation's bad. We need to just lower taxes until there's none, and the government can't spend any money or we'll run a debt. It's just nonsensical. And I think when you get to meet the people who are in Congress, who know what they're doing and have actually a vision to improve the condition of our country, there is a time and a place for deficit spending, especially when you're in a liquidity trap, especially after an economic crisis. And there's zero consumer demand in the economy. And so in that case, government spending gets the economy rolling, keeps it moving, but then you have to have a long-term vision for cutting back that spending, cutting taxes to enable consumer demand and get output growing. And I think that Donald Trump has a vision for that. When you compare it to Hillary Clinton's plan, she wants to raise taxes on the middle class. Donald Trump would save people more money than Hillary's plan. And so we'd all have more money in our pockets that stimulate demand and it'd get our economy moving. So I really, whether or not he's put out exact numbers on entitlements or welfare, and because he wants to spend money on infrastructure, I say go ahead. I think his plan's much better than Hillary Clinton, and it's part of this. His is a better view for the future of our country. And so with that, I think it's another great reason to vote for Donald Trump.
I think this is the fundamental mistake, though, that we have so much wrong, as you say, with our country. And then this argument comes forward that it's just because it's not in the right hands. And when you're talking about, well, Trump is going to spend deficit spending better than Hillary Clinton, that does not jive with actual Keynesian economic theory. You might as well have made the same argument for Barack Obama inheriting the recession in 2009. They spent $787 billion within a year. So I don't think that that's an actual coherent argument on economics. And if Donald Trump and the anti-electuals really were trying to bring in this kind of grown-up view of debts and deficits and spending and taxes and entitlements, then they would embrace Paul Ryan. They would embrace our measured plans that may not be the penny plan, the Connie Mack penny plan, that would probably be much more significant,
right?
Or something like going back to 2008 levels of spending before we had this massive spending binge, and capping spending at that level, reducing everything down to the state level so that they can spend as they need to and reform the programs as they need to. Mm-hmm. I would think that would be a great plan that would be very galvanizing for conservatives. But instead, they've rejected that argument and gone forward with a tax plan that also is threatening to blow the deficit open by about $5 trillion in 10 years, claiming that it's all going to come from growth. But I was in this argument in 2012 and 2010 with the Tea Party and Steve Poizner for governor in particular. People don't buy that argument that you're just going to get a bunch of economic growth by cutting taxes. So I think that's part of what blows up our party a lot of times is we talk about getting growth and it comes from low taxes and low spending, but it doesn't translate out to the broader economy. We're not speaking to people who are not speaking the same language as us. And that's part of what's driving our polarization. And Trump does come in and speak blue collar talk better than any Republican in a long time. And I will give him full credit to that. He goes after trade in a way that works for the miner, for the worker in Ohio. And he might be driving blue collar workers back to the Republican Party in a way that no other candidate could have done. Bar none, maybe. But still, there's more to this. It's not sufficient enough. And that's the problem we had in 2012. It's the problem we're having in 2016. It's the problem the party has in general. It's a problem that's not patched over by Donald Trump and is not nearly improved by him either.
So just to respond to that, I think the argument that, you know, the country's not in the right hands, I think really the only way you can respond to that is Donald Trump represents much more than just himself when we're talking about who's going to run the country. Donald Trump represents a group of people. And that group includes Paul Ryan. It includes Mike Pence. It includes the conservative economists like Neil Ferguson. It includes all these guys who contribute to the way that the Republicans adopt and mend their plan for this country. And those hands are very different from the hands of Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and those who would seek to multiply by 10 the size of our government, and never rein back in that type of spending and never lower taxes. And so I think really the argument is, who do you want to run the country? This group of people or this group of people? And I think for most Republicans, it's going to be, let's have the Republicans keep power. But as we saw with Bush, it's really unclear what the Republican establishment stands for ever at a time. And so the great thing about Trump is that he has shown that he's not just a puppet for the Republican establishment. And the reason why, when you talked about, well, take Paul Ryan over Trump, the reason why Trump in a recent poll is trusted more by Americans than Paul Ryan is because Paul Ryan has for too long represented your we want immigration to come in to help business. We want to support these open border, open trade policies. And Trump has come just like Great Britain and said, no more of the immigration, and we need a trade policy that helps American workers, and it's protectionist. And that's not something we've seen from the Republican Party ever. And so it's a new direction. And I think that Trump represents, when you were talking about the blue collar worker, he represents somebody who's actually going to say, I'm going to fight for your wages. I'm going to fight for your employment opportunities. And I'm not going to let these corporations just go overseas to exploit cheaper labor and take away your livelihood and the skills that you've learned throughout your life to employ in the workforce.
Do you think that Trump is reaching out to a whole new kind of voter?
Say that again?
Do you think Trump's reaching out to a whole new kind of voter?
Oh, absolutely. I think he's entirely tapped, and he's tapped a completely untapped market. But I think that he's energized the youth as well. You haven't seen this type of energy behind politics since Bernie Sanders on the left. And so it's great that we're seeing this on both sides. But the reality is Bernie Sanders' movement died the second Bernie Sanders sold out to Hillary Clinton. And Donald Trump's not going to do that. Donald Trump has shown that he is not about anybody else but himself. And so when he wins this election, we're really going to see a new direction for our country. And it's one where the establishment bends to his will. He doesn't bend to theirs. And I think he really listens to the people, and he really listens to what people are saying about him and the way he's perceived. And if his supporters demand something of him, he'll give it to them. And I think that's something that we've never had in politics before. And so I think it's a great thing in Donald Trump.
We definitely had it in politics before. We've definitely had that in politics before. We've had William Jennings Bryan going to Iowa, saying, well, the people of Iowa are against silver, so I'm against silver. I'll figure out the questions later. And we had that with Donald Trump in Iowa when he couldn't figure out his position on the ethanol mandate for 24 hours. Eventually decided, well, the people of Iowa need this. it's all for their jobs, so I'm going to take their position on it. This is an unprincipled stand that reveals the banality of politics in a way. And you mentioned it being the establishment. I would argue that it was the old guard that first laid down their guard to Donald Trump. They wanted the establishment in general wanted either Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio or one of them to be the nominee. As soon as Marco was out, they didn't want Ted Cruz, so they all ran to Donald Trump and thought it would be so great to get their old Nixonian Republican Party back together. But it's been the party of Reagan since then. It's been the party of the Bushes since then. Maybe it shouldn't be the party of the Bushes ever again. But it's had its the 2010 movement was a movement of principle to getting our deficits, our debt under control, getting government spending lowered, getting our programs dismantled. You're in Utah, where Mike Lee is your senator, running on a conservative reform agenda to a cost cronyism, destroy this protectionist racket, get all of these economic policies back to our free market principles, back to our limited government principles. Whether it works for people, well, it will work for people, but we have to sell that to them still. And instead, we brought in Donald Trump to basically, I would argue, patch over it all with this argument that you can solve all these problems with correcting our immigration problems, and we can resort to great protectionist policies to protect jobs. The globalization of the world is already happening right in our midst. We're either going to keep up with it or get left behind by it. It's not something that's going to be resolved by simply shouting the loudest and shutting down trade and immigration. I think the selling point for Donald Trump isn't moving people, and there's plenty of evidence that it's not. Like I said, he might be up 12 more points with blue-collar workers in Ohio and Iowa, but he's chasing everyone else away from the party in places like Florida, North Carolina, to the point where Colorado and Virginia were swing states 4 years ago are off the map this year, and Arizona's back on the map. So it's the nature of our double bind that the people that can win our party's primaries typically don't appeal to the broader electorate. And it is tenfold exacerbated by the Trump phenomenon.
So I definitely want to touch on a few things that you've talked about. One of those is the issue of globalization. And you mentioned Mike Lee's, conservative package and dealing with this protectionism. I think there's really two issues with globalization that Trump exemplifies that I think we really should highlight here. And it's the immigration flows that are a result of the globalist agenda to sort of destroy the cultural identity of a country. And they do that through massive immigration of people who are not assimilation or assimilatable. And
this began back in 1965. Sorry to interrupt, but this began back in 1965. We've been King Canute staring at the tide ever since. This is the liberalization policies of 1965 that are now coming home to roost. You could do nothing on immigration, and we'd still have a massive influx of 18,000 new voters, all of different bends, that are against the Republican Party.
But you're not considering what has happened in Germany, what's happened in Switzerland recently as a response to the Syrian crisis. And yes, we've had immigration and we've had our normal numbers of immigration. I'm fine with that. What we're talking about is the massive immigration that's let in during a crisis where we have people seeking refugee status, and it's that type of immigration that we have to quell, because just like with the Turks in Germany, these people are not assimilating well. You've got rampant crime in Germany, and the only person who's speaking about preventing this type of cultural crises is the people in Britain with their Brexit, and now Donald Trump. And I think America's going to have their Brexit moment, and it's going to be big, and it's validated by what's happening in Germany and those other countries. My second point is on trade. People like Mike Lee never talk about how we're going to bring a trade surplus or how we're going to deal with the globalization of the Asian markets and how we're going to expand to these new areas of business. When you're talking about being left behind by globalization, the only way we'd be left behind is if we continue our current policies with NAFTA or even with the TPP. We need someone like Donald Trump who can take any new country who wants to enter into the global market and make a deal that's not only fair for American workers, but also fair for consumers. And it is the issue of, do we just dump in absolutely cheap products that are of low quality to our markets, and give us cheaper goods that are less quality, but in the same time destroying employment opportunities for our citizens. And so I think we do need someone to sit at the table and analyze whether or not these trade deals are beneficial for America, because for the last 50 years, they haven't been, and we've been screwed over by them. And our workers have suffered. American business has suffered because we're losing to China. We're losing to these other countries who use their state governments to interfere in their production and gives them an upper edge. And that's the type of cronyism that we don't want to be allowed in the market. And if that's what's going to happen, then we need to be able to say, no, you can't come to the table with the global market because we have these rules established, and we're actually going to set up some system of sanctions and some system of enforcement. And that's half what the TPP is attempting to do, because there hasn't been any way that we can go to a country and say, hey, you're not following the rules that we outlined in NAFTA or in any of these agreements. And so, there has to be punishment because you're taking advantage of us. So those are my two arguments with globalization, that I think Donald Trump would be a great step forward in terms of immigration and maintaining our cultural identity, and as well as in trade, by getting us deals that are not only fair, but advantageous for the American worker and for consumers.
Corey,
90% of the world's customers live outside of the borders of the United States. We have to open those markets. We have to get into those markets. If we don't, we see it clearly with the Philippines and now Malaysia, and I think it's going to be a domino effect in the Pacific region now that we've rejected TPP at Obama's White House and Hillary Clinton is not going to go forward with it. There's going to be a domino effect out there of all of these countries handing all of their production lines over to China. And we're going to be swamped out there too. So that was an entire market that we just took off the table because we were unwilling to deal with them. And I don't think the TPP is its design, because it was designed by a progressive president to get progressive votes that it didn't even get. So it's definitely not the gold standard, as Hillary Clinton would say. But we have this problem. We've solved this problem before, when we had a massive market in the Latino community in Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, Colombia, and South Korea. And we solved it with trade negotiations. We brought 180 trade violations up to the World Trade Court or World Trade Organization, especially against China. And you're talking about dumping cheap steel and cheap products. Donald Trump bought them. The Trump Organization builds its products that way. And that's the same on immigration. You talk about cheap labor, Donald Trump employed them. And he's saying he's going to be able to fix it because he knows that this is what employers do and this is advantageous to employers. But forgive me for not buying it.
So basically, let me mention. So with the TPP, I think there's just some things we missed there. The TPP is not being rejected because people don't want to open up those markets. Everybody wants to get into those markets. The reason why the TPP was largely rejected was the way that it dealt with a product's the intellectual property rights of a product.
Biologics,
right.
Yes.
And
yeah, that's why it's been rejected at Congress. Absolutely.
Right. And they talked about that in a hearing on August 1st, 2013. And it was in that where we got the first sense of the things that are in the TPP besides just doing business with these countries. And it's dealing with the way that they copy our products and they remake them and they make them a terrible quality, but then they go and they rip off consumers. And so I think when you're talking about that domino effect, we need to make sure that the global market has a standard of business. It's like in America. You want to do business in America? These are the rules to play the game. And if you don't abide by these rules, your business will be shut down. You can't just open up a business, pay your workers nothing, and have no types of standards for safety, cleanliness. We have standards in America, and I think that the global market has to have that type of conversation too, so that when we talk about incorporating these Asian markets, we say, okay, you want to come to the table, these are the rules that are going to be established. And I think that that Donald Trump, more so than Hillary Clinton, is going to be able to sit down at the table because he's done business with them. Like you were saying, Yeah, he's bought cheap still. Yes, he's employed illegal immigrants, all because in those cases it was allowed by law and it was the best thing to do for his business to grow. And that I wouldn't blame him unless it was illegal in that case. And I don't blame him if he does the opposite of that with our country, if that's the way that our country needs to move forward. And that's the way that we change the law. But businessman for taking advantage of the way that the law is written at the time to get the most profit for his business. So I don't really hold that against him. And so I think, yeah, we need to look at that.
The only problem with that is when you start from a position of a sailing free trade, as Donald Trump has, talking about it in the most negative light, the most negative terms, what you do in the world marketplace for the countries that want our deals, want our products, is you either bring them to the table desperately or not at all. And if they have somewhere else to go, like China in the Pacific, like Russia and Eastern Europe, or Brazil and Latin America, they will go there first. They won't come crawling to the table because Donald Trump needs them to listen to him first. So we have to keep in mind that when you assail free trade, as the progressives have done for years, and conservatives haven't, you do turn away markets. They go to Vladimir Putin. They go to Brazil. They go to China. And we don't want that either.
Right. No, I agree. I agree 100% with that. And I think that
it doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Again, it comes back to who's sitting at the table with Donald Trump, advising him on how we look at the trade deal and advising him on what we should do with that. And so what I really want to get from you is, are you willing to take the loss of not supporting Donald Trump now, letting Hillary Clinton win and run this country for the next 4, potentially 8 years, and dealing with the blowback there, which is the potential loss of Supreme Court justice seats, the potential of massive deficit spending, no entitlement reform, no welfare reform, more Affordable Care Act. She's already said she'd expand that. And again, denying the TPP. We don't know if the real reason, if she would repackage that with the intellectual property changes. We can't really speak well on what will happen there. But everything that I've outlined, are you willing to take the risk with that just because you don't? The only argument I've really heard is, well, I don't really know that he stands for this. I don't really know that that's what he's going to do. And so I'm rejecting him, even though I've clearly laid out he's going to be sitting at the table with these Republican leaders, Paul Ryan, Mike Pence, Newt Gingrich, Chris Christie, all these people are going to be sitting at the table. And he knows the blowback that will exist if he does something that at least his cabinet doesn't agree on, and that the conservative supporters that are now behind him agree with as well. And so I think, he's a different man than he was in the primary, and that's true of every candidate who runs for president. And I think now he's a much more level-headed candidate who's willing to compromise and take in the entire nation's views. And you won't get that with the basket of deplorables, Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump has shown he actually wants to work with all of America. He wants to improve the conditions of all Americans. And I think that that's a ticket you cannot deny, just solely based on you're scared that you don't know what Donald Trump stands for, and that he's not the perfect candidate that we all envision, that he's not a Ronald Reagan. And so that's my concern, is that by rejecting him on any of those weak grounds, we're looking at a Hillary Clinton presidency. And we have less than a week to strap down, get our supporters in line, and make sure everybody who's ever voted R in the past is showing up at the booth to vote for Donald Trump.
Well, I'll make the stronger points, because the reason to reject Trump has been the reason all along. He is not just unprincipled and unsuitable for conservatives. He may be unqualified and unsuitable for the presidency. And you say he's worked with people before. He's also lashed out at the people that were working with him before. And look at the number of surrogates he has now compared to what he had even a few weeks ago. Whether or not that's because of politics or because of who he is up for debate. But the fact of the matter is, we still have plenty of people out there that are rejecting Donald Trump, even though they're conservative, and they're worried about all other matters of public policy. Hillary Clinton, if she's president, will inherit one of the most overpowered bureaucracies imaginable. And I have no idea how corrupting she can make it. I am absolutely terrified of it. But I'm also terrified of leaving it in Donald Trump's hands. I think it is run through with cronyism, run through with corruption.
You're saying you're scared
and
of
leaving it in Donald Trump's hand isn't going to be any better.
which one's worse though to you in your mind, and why? Give me the reasons why they're worse on a if you got to balance the two, why is one worse than the other? Because all I've heard in this entire debate is I'm unsure of Trump, he's unprincipled, unqualified, but nothing about Hillary Clinton and how that's 1,000 times worse for our country.
I don't think it's 1,000 times worse. I would go back to PJ O'Rourke's argument in the beginning that Hillary Clinton is untrustworthy and unsuitable under normal circumstances. Donald Trump is untrustworthy and unsuitable under completely unimaginable circumstances. So we know it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't argument, and you can fall one way or the other. I fall with the devil you know. I have to just say that, yes, I don't think Donald Trump would make a better president than Hillary Clinton. And it comes down to his temperament. It comes down to his ability to appeal to the best of America. And maybe she doesn't have that quality, but he doesn't even look for it. And I don't want to see a president that thinks the best way to govern is by shouting over Congress. I don't want a president that thinks the best way to govern is by dealing with how others treat him on the world stage or in politics. He's vindictive. He's gone after folks. And he's gone after folks that have simply had a matter of disagreement with him on something small or something large. And I don't want to see our country going down that course.
Do you think that there's a secret Trump voter out there, that the Trump voters are like, there's some that will not respond to polls, will lie in the poll?
Is there a shy Tory, basically?
Yeah.
The shy Tories, the shy Trump voters? As of right now, I think it hasn't been very pronounced. It hasn't made a significant impact on the polling.
What do you think, Gunnar?
Well, first I want to respond to the last point, because I think we really got into the meat of the debate here in terms of comparing Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and Corey's vision of which one is going to be worse for the country. And I think he's missing the point here. You know, he brings up that he thinks Donald Trump's unprincipled and unqualified, but Donald Trump is way more qualified than Hillary Clinton to do what he's setting out to do, and that's create jobs and restore the American exceptionalism that we are seeking. In terms of who's more untrustworthy and unsuitable, Hillary Clinton by a long shot. If anything that WikiLeaks has brought out, and I think this destroys the crux of Corey's argument, the devil you know argument, we don't know Hillary Clinton. If anything, what WikiLeaks has revealed is that Hillary Clinton is not at all the person that she's come out to the public and sold herself as. She's not to be trusted by any measure. And the corrupt vision that she has for the future of America is something that she's willing to commit atrocious crimes to achieve. And at least with Donald Trump, we know, A, that he's qualified. When you look at all the people who've come out and said the ability that he has to bring people to the table and build a successful business empire, what has Hillary Clinton done? Be a senator, which she kicked somebody out, was running against her so she could win. Her tactics. And again, when we're talking about trustworthiness, Donald Trump says what's on his mind, and he's held accountable for that. He says what he's thinking, and the people either burn him at the stake for it, or they cheer him on in troves of by the crowds for what he's saying. And with Hillary Clinton, we don't know at all what she's thinking, what she stands for. And so I really think both of those issues are voting issues for Trump, because the principle that he stands for is, look, I'm viewing America as a project that needs to be worked on, just like he did in New York with the ice skating rink. Go look this up. The city was taking years and years to get it done. He came in, he said, I can do this under budget. He did it under budget. He got it done in half the time. He sees that with America. He wants to put us back to work. Hillary Clinton doesn't have that type of vision or the know-how that he has with the businesses that he's run. And so I think he's not only qualified, he's not only more trustworthy than Hillary Clinton, but he's suitable because the way he deals with Congress is by saying, hey, Newt Gingrich, go deal with Congress. I need help. And hey, all these other people who have experience in these fields, go deal with Congress because we need to get this done. And that's what I want to see done, and so he'll get it done. And so I think at the end of the day, Donald Trump is a much better candidate for the future than Hillary Clinton. There's no question in my mind. And I think that'll resonate with people watching this debate. And so I think for the majority of Republicans who voted Republican in the past can make at least some small concessions to say he is far better than Hillary Clinton. And that's the majority of the opinion that I feel I'm getting online from people who are starting to come over to the Trump train and follow it to the end.
It's a little late for that. It's pretty late in the cycle to be on that realm. He is definitely given a lot of way. So if they're coming back now, it really was because Hillary Clinton was that bad. But I don't think that the same demographic trends that have worked against Republicans for generations are suddenly going to turn in our favor now and are suddenly going to make everything so much easier for us and help us in any way.
Right. I was talking about the people who left Trump after the video. I'm seeing a large chunk of those people come back, even in silent methods, to say, you know what? Okay, I was bothered by this a couple weeks ago, but I now understand what's at stake. I'm going to support Trump. But to your point about the demographics that largely have not ever supported Republicans, currently are not in our favor, I think you're right. I don't think he's going to win over women by the highest margins just out of nowhere because of Hillary Clinton. I don't think that's something that's going to happen, nor do I think that's necessarily going to happen with the Latino or youth vote. But I do think that we're seeing enough of the independents, and you're seeing that in the polls. You're seeing that in the lack of enthusiasm for Hillary Clinton. I think it's going to be enough for Donald Trump to win this election.
I think it's more of a feature of the coverage. I think this thing waxes and wanes as whoever's dominating the cycle at the time, whatever story happens to be the biggest. And in that way, it's always been the argument from the Trump campaign that the media rigs the election. But in this case, it's clearly not in Hillary Clinton's favor. So they're working with it. And that's just how politics works sometimes. So at this point, the public is moving in that direction. Maybe the electorate is too. We are voting now. Got my ballot right next to me. So that's already happening out there. And so we'll see if that has any effect on overall trends. This argument was supposed to be had back during the primaries. It wasn't the argument that ended up happening because everyone was so interested in their own pathway. Didn't really think much about winning when they thought they could just not lose crucial primaries. So that's what ended up getting pushed under. And in the end, I think it just blows open the real crux of our election problem, our time for choosing here, which is we are never supposed to let the government get this powerful that we have to fear who we're going to elect, that we have to worry about how they're going to appoint justices or if they're going to go through regular processes and put everything under scrutiny.
Term limits under Trump. He's outlined term limit measures that Hillary Clinton.
We have that in California. It doesn't work that well in California. All the lobbyists, basically, all the congressmen became lobbyists, all the legislators became lobbyists, and now they're even more powerful than before. So it's not a panacea. This always comes from the voter. The voter has to choose what they really want. And in this election, it's actually probably coming down to these swing voters choosing which one they dislike more. And because of the waxing and waning coverage, that kind of has had an impact on Trump's numbers at times. It's had an impact on Clinton's numbers. But this thing is boomerang from 3 to 6%. So again, this is an argument we could have had in the primaries. We probably would have started to see some of the fractures and fissures that are definitely taking hold now as we're coming into the final stretch. And obviously, it does happen this way. Something like 90% of Republicans are supposedly supporting Donald Trump in most polls, which is right where Mitt Romney was. And if they get that number up to 92, 93, they'll split a few more states. So that's been the argument that they've made, and it's been an argument based entirely on opposition to Hillary Clinton. And that has been my argument from the beginning. If you build a movement that is only built on opposition, you build nothing but an opposition party, then you have to be sure you're dotting all the right I's and crossing all the T's and getting all the people to agree with you on your opposition, because otherwise you leave yourself undefined and you'll leave yourself open to being taken over by somebody who doesn't seem to share the same principles, that wants to take everything in a new direction, and has done it in almost a hostile takeover way of you're either with him or against him. And that's been the largest part of dealing with the Trump phenomenon, especially since he's won the nomination, is it's all happened on his terms. It's never happened on the conservatives' terms. It's never happened on Paul's terms. It's never happened on anyone else's. It's happened on Trump's terms. And I think that's indicative of a personality and indicative of a presidency that is definitely more troubling to me than something that Hillary Clinton would pursue.
Do you guys think
Go ahead, John.
media bias is a weird way of helping Trump because everyone is uniting behind him against the media?
Yeah, so I think definitely it's helping Trump, uniting against the media. Even now with the emails and the FBI investigation reopening against Hillary Clinton, you still see CNN saying, "Well, the FBI is also going to investigate Trump." Yeah, and it's just like the media is still for Hillary Clinton. They'll do whatever they can to support her till the very end. And but I wanted to make this point, and I think after hearing everything that Corey's laid out, and the very real concerns conservatives have with Trump, they're concerns that I have shared throughout this entire primary process as well. But I think at the very end, we have to make a pragmatic decision. We have to make a rational decision about the way that the direction that we want this country to go. And so I really want people to follow me on this. Do not pull a John Kasich and just write in a candidate that has zero chance of winning the presidency. Do not, if you're in Utah, support McMullen, who has 0% chance of being the next president. These type of actions, these protest votes, do no good because nobody's really seeing those and saying, "Oh well, there was a small little chunk over here that didn't like Trump." We already know that. We know people have problems with Trump. But right now, we're at the crux of at this point in history where we decide. Do we want Hillary Clinton and her cronies to run this country? Her people who there's a circle of her peers being investigated by the FBI in separate investigations. Do we want those type of people running our country? Or do we want God-loving and God-fearing men like Mike Pence and Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Paul Ryan, Chris Christie, these type of men to be running our country and have cabinet positions? I think take your fears to Donald Trump. Take the fact that, yes, he did want things done on his terms because that's the type of man that he is. But realize that he's working with a team of people that you like and agree with. And it's those type of people that we can say, okay, I feel more comfortable having them run this country than Hillary Clinton or her cronies. And so at the end of all this, don't protest vote. Vote for Trump because it may come down to, especially if you live in a swing state like Florida, Pennsylvania, Arizona. If it comes down to you in those areas, then we really need you to show up. We need you to get your families to show up. We need to call in your neighbors, get them to show up, and vote for Donald Trump. This is a crux moment, and we can't let our small concerns about his character or the way that he's going to run the game know that he's got the right men around him, and they are powerful beings in the party, and use that to support for Donald Trump. And I think that's basically my argument here. And I hope it's enough for you guys to realize that even libertarian, conservative, whatever you are, he's a better case for liberty than Hillary Clinton, who really just wants to use her power to exploit others to make herself richer, especially off the backs of Americans.
I hear your argument, and I just say it comes down to voting with conscience. Devotion should only be bound by integrity. And if you have problems with Donald Trump that you've expressed in terms of he's not suited for the presidency, then it comes down to making a pragmatic decision. You can go one way or the other, but keep in mind, one of the things that we do agree on with this whole he's going to make everything come back to his terms is that's the kind of presidency we would expect. And that's not the kind of presidency that conservatives should support.
Do you guys think sort of whole demeanor is something that all liberals have been saying forever? That's the stereotype that Republicans have of being racist, sexist, all that stuff. Do you guys feel like he kind of embodies that?
Can you repeat that?
Do you feel like he embodies what the left says Republicans are a stereotype? Yeah.
No.
You don't?
No, I don't. I never buy into the left's overwrought arguments about the way, like I said, I think it's indoctrination on a level too, that comes from academia telling everyone that it's this way and hiding other facts or obfuscating certain historical references so they don't have to deal with the actual reality. They want everything to be black and white in almost not a pun intended way. So I think that's basically what they use. They use that against Romney. They use that against Rubio. They would use this against anyone. With Trump and his womanizing ways, maybe it comes out a little bit more pronounced. But they've always tried this, and I think it actually in this case, I think it leads to some of that blowback that Gunnar talks about. That the media has been doing this for a long time. It can only cry wolf so many times before somebody realizes there is no wolf, even if there is one knocking at the door in this case.
Gunnar?
You know, I agree with Corey on this. Really, I think it's it's a matter of the way that the media has been working, the indoctrination, and the way they set the narrative. And I think Donald Trump has existed as a celebrity, and he's been playing this game for so long. He's donated to Democrats in the past as it benefited his business, and I don't think that when he decided to run for president, he entered into this game of what you do when you're going to align yourself with a party, how that works and everything. And I think he left all of that really behind. And so his demeanor is not really an issue to me so much that I think once he does win, he needs to adopt. He's no longer a candidate for president. And I think once he wins, I think the world will expect a different demeanor of him, and I think he will immediately adopt that as he accepts his new position as commander-in-chief of this country. And I think he can do it. He's shown that even throughout this entire race, he's evolved and changed and dealt with people differently. And so I think that it shouldn't be an issue to anybody. And I think when we're dealing with vote your conscience, right, it really comes down to you definitely can be a sliver of the population that says, I don't like how this two-party system works. I don't like how our country is designed in the moment for how we elect the people who run our country. But you cannot deny the fact that that's how it's set up to run. So if you just you don't like the two candidates that have been picked by the nominating parties, then you're basically just you're seeing the game being played in front of you, and you're saying, I don't like the rules of the game. I'm not gonna play. I'm gonna just step out and not participate this season. And to me, that's really selfish, because what you're doing is you're saying, I'm gonna just let whoever everybody else votes for win, when I myself might have conservative principles. So really what you're doing by voting your conscience, by writing in McCain, or by writing in McMullen, you're abandoning your principles, because you're saying, I'm going to let Hillary Clinton win this election by not voting for somebody who is much better than Hillary Clinton. And you're just writing in somebody who definitely doesn't have a chance at winning, and you're protesting the system. You're protesting the two people that the party have put forward. You're protesting the Republican Party. You're protesting the process that we've gone through. And so to me, it's just selfish. And I think that in the end, the reason why lesser of two evils has existed since our country has really had this two-party system in power is because that's how this game works. And so you either play by the rules of the game or you don't. And in that case, you're really not helping. You're just hurting our country by letting Hillary Clinton win.
All the polls.
I disagree. I'm sorry. You go, John.
all the polls seem to show that it's a really close race. And so, what I'm wondering is, what do you guys think of to kind of finish this off? What do you guys think? One of my last two questions. What do you guys think that the most? What do you guys think that people often kind of figure out realize that they're not really realize, but they think that their voice is not heard. They think that because electoral college, that what they vote doesn't really matter. What do you guys think about that?
It doesn't in California. It doesn't out here, that's for sure. But that's an established process, though. That's a system that the Constitution established to keep the voters from actually having too much control over the rest of the republic, to keep majority from being able to run roughshod over all minority rights. So if the electoral college is the argument, and I know Gunnar said this about it being a protest vote, not a principled vote, and I thoroughly disagree, because voting is always an affirmative act. Everyone should see voting as an affirmative act. You don't vote against someone even when you think that's what you're doing. You're all helping somebody else win. And for one thing, you can't actually.
You are.
What was that?
In a swing state, you are. If you stay home in a swing state, and your vote very well could swing the state either which way, and then you multiply that by the hundreds of people who are in the same boat as you, and if all those people just say, I'm going to protest vote, and they all are very similar in the way that they vote regularly, then that has a huge impact. And that's
Florida in Florida in 2000. Yes, Florida.
So I would say that we need to change the way that we deal with this protest vote idea, and we need to say, hey, look, like, we have two choices. Which one's worse? And if they think Hillary Clinton's worse, then they need to get out and vote for Donald Trump. It's that simple. Do you want World War III? Do you want Hillary Clinton to keep her war-hawking ways and destabilize even further the Middle East? She already said she wants to up her military intervention even further and bomb more countries. And so I think we'll get more and more of these problems, and especially with the tensions with Russia and the terrible relations that Obama has with Russia right now, and it's deteriorating by the day. I think that Hillary Clinton means imminent war with Russia, at least a proxy war, and it could get to the point where they want to take preemptive military action against us. So I think a vote for Donald Trump is a vote against World War III, potentially another military draft. And so if you don't want any of these becoming reality, then you better very well consider this whole protest vote your conscience idea, because I had many people who were like that, and they supported Ted Cruz back when it was vote your conscience, and he was all about that. But now they're very much about supporting Donald Trump, because the risks have never been higher, the stakes have never been higher, and we need to consider World War III as a very real possibility. And Donald Trump having come out and said, I'll work with Putin, I'll work to stop this military action overseas. And I think that's even something that resonates with liberals and progressives who do not like Hillary Clinton and her war hawkish ways. And so I think that's why we may even see some of those people come over and support Donald Trump privately. They'd never admit it in public, but I think that they may privately vote for Donald Trump. And so, really think hard on that protest vote idea. And I think by far that's the largest reason to come out and support Donald Trump on Election Day.
To summarize what you guys have said, looking past Election Day in the future, what do you guys think that this is going to really mean? This election, like how important, how is it damaging to the Republican Party to vote for Trump? Are we kind of giving in to the alt-right by voting for Trump?
I would say so. I think that this election was kind of one of our last grasps at glory, with especially the way demographics are trending. It's almost like Georgia, Texas, and Arizona are about to slip right from our grasp and never come back. So I thought absolutely this is our last chance to get the middle class and ride that wave to the White House. And instead we nominated somebody that's going to be running with the blue collar voters more so, but is going to alienate everyone else. And I think that could be a generational mistake that could last a very long time. And it could sour people on Republicans for a long time going forward. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a contingency that decides they don't want to be associated with the Republican brand anymore because they want to win elections again.
I'd agree up to the point where we started talking about alienation. I think Donald Trump's going to bring much more people under the wing of the Republican Party than ever before. And we saw that in his speech of the RNC when he brought up minimum wage and equal pay for equal work. He's okay with compromising with the left to bring more people under the umbrella of what he stands for, and that means he's in it to win it. And I'll tell you, the second he becomes president, which he will, I have no doubt that will happen. I think that we're going to see a narrative from Donald Trump that is inclusive of all the citizenry, because he really does want America to be great again, and he wants he wants us all at the same at the same table, working to improve our conditions. And so, yeah, I don't think it'll alienate so much as it'll redefine the party. And then after Trump is over, I think, just like after Reagan and just like anybody else, I think rebranding happens after every major candidate, and I think we will have to rebrand after Trump, especially if he loses.
Yes, I would agree with that. I basically have my view on that is I think the conservative movement will last after this. It will just last in a very different capacity, and it will be up to principled conservatives of all stripes and moderates as well to decide what capacity that's going to be. So we have 6 days left to go, and it's definitely coming down to the wire. So I understand the argument for voting for Donald Trump, especially if the argument is vote for Donald Trump to stop Hillary Clinton.
Right.
But that isn't sufficient enough for some people. And for those of us that can't get to that point where we want to say, yes, we want Donald Trump to be our president because we don't want Hillary Clinton to be our president. So having another outlet for that vote, as well as keeping everything in line on the down ballot, has always been a valuable pursuit for me.
So yeah, I right here, and it's really a tight race in some of the swing states. So to finish this off, what's the prediction for how election day goes?
I'll give my prediction. I think we'll win Florida. I think Pennsylvania is going to come down to the wire. And realize when you're looking at all these polls that they're 3 or 4 days behind. Okay, and the gravity of what we've seen released on Hillary Clinton, and it is getting worse every day as the FBI gives us more and more updates on what they're doing. People are going to prison over the FBI reopening this investigation. And I think that as the polls catch up, especially as we look 3 or 4 days in advance, you'll see more of those toss-up states. You'll see Arizona definitely go for Trump. You'll see Nevada. That is a toss-up for me. I think we'll win Ohio. We'll win Florida. Pennsylvania, again, I want to wait a few more days before I make a solid prediction on that. But if we win Florida and Ohio, we have and lose Colorado and lose Nevada, we have to win Pennsylvania or we lose. We're going to win North Carolina. And so, again, we have to win Pennsylvania if we lose Colorado and Nevada. And, again, that's assuming we win Ohio and Florida.
I think Hillary Clinton's numbers with women in particular already get her to 272 electoral votes. And then I get Trump to 265, giving him Florida and North Carolina. But I think New Hampshire, Pennsylvania are definitely off the map. I was giving Nevada in a 265 scenario. I think he's holding on to Iowa and Ohio. I don't know if he has a campaign to capitalize on it.
Right.
So I count it as a floor ceiling situation where it's going to be best case scenario for Donald Trump is right now 265 to Clinton 273. And at the worst case, if they really did manage to put in the organization to get it done over the last couple of weeks, then Clinton could come out with 358 to Trump's 180. I think that's the floor ceiling at this point.
All right. Well, I think, yeah, like I said, it'll come down to those few key states, and I definitely think there's a path for Donald Trump winning, and it's going to come down to the wire. And I think the polls are behind 3 or 4 days, so let's keep watching, especially in states where early voting was not allowed. We're going to see that really helping Trump here in the last few days. But again, if you're watching and you're a Republican and you live in a swing state, you need to call your friends, get them out, make sure everybody who's on the fence, like Corey, I think it's just a little Again, he's brought up great points, but I think at the end of the day, in order to prevent World War III, I need you guys to call your friends and family, get those people in those swing states to get out and vote Donald Trump. Everything's on the line. The stakes are too high. It's Donald Trump or it's war.
All right, Corey and Gunnar, remember to go vote.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you, John, so much for
Thank you, Gunnar.
come on this. Thank you so much. Corey, again, thank you again.
Thank you, guys.